Hello, and welcome to the Undeserving Podcast. I can't believe we're actually starting this.
Yeah, first episode. This is exciting. I've been
Wow.
waiting for this moment.
Yes, absolutely. I am Bryan, and
I'm Josh.
we are two friends who met probably 6 months ago, 7 months ago.
I mean, we started working together 6 months ago.
Yeah.
When we first met, it was the most awkward introduction I think I had ever had, and that was probably a solid year ago.
And you see how God made it work, despite the awkward encounter.
Yeah, it was pretty awkward.
Yeah.
So, since we're already on that subject, here's how the story goes. So, Woody and I here, we work in a warehouse, right? And I used to be on first shift, so I'd be coming in at 6 in the morning. Woody works third shift, was still working third shift, so he'd be just about ready to leave, and there used to be a girl on Woody's shift. And she knew I did youth ministry because I trained her. And she knew Woody was interested in ministry because, obviously they had been working together. So randomly out of the blue, this girl, drags Woody up to me as I'm walking in one morning. And I'm half delirious still because, 6 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning.
And I'm half delirious because I work third shift.
Yeah, so he's tired, I'm tired, and this girl just, drags Woody up to me by the wrist and is like, "Josh, this is Bryan. He does ministry too. You guys should talk." And then just awkwardly walks off.
And as a high-functioning introvert, I have to confirm that was probably one of the most tense, awkward situations I've ever been in my entire life.
And as a ridiculously obnoxious extrovert, I could sense Woody's uncomfortableness. So here we are, a solid year later. We have a pretty solid friendship, and now we're doing this here podcast.
Yeah, after the first two sentences of discourse that we had, I think that the conversation started to flow a little more naturally. Even though I walked away from that encounter feeling excited, but also kind of awkward and uncomfortable.
Yeah. It was that just turned out to be an odd day altogether for me for sure. But
Yeah. Well, God bless her soul. It all worked out.
Yeah. We miss that girl. She doesn't work with us anymore, but we miss her.
Yeah. Shout out to you.
You know who you are.
We just kind of wanted to give a quick introduction to our podcast, what we're going to be about. And I think we're going to introduce ourselves, share our testimonies. This is going to be a shorter episode because we just kind of want to set the groundwork so you guys know what to expect. And maybe next time when we do have our next podcast, we'll get into some really deep conversation. I'm Bryan, like I said. I am 22 years old. I became a Christian about 3 years ago now. I'm currently enrolled at Lancaster Bible College for pastoral ministry. I'm one semester in. I went to college before I was a Christian for about a year. Decided I didn't know what I wanted to do. Stopped going to college. Then I transferred to LBC, and I'm only a semester in, but I love it and I love what I'm doing, and I'm really excited to see where God leads me with all of this. As far as goals go, I really have a desire to finish LBC with pastoral ministry, and I'm not sure if I want to immediately start looking for a pastoral job after, but I do know that I want to go back eventually for either a Master's of Divinity degree or a Master's of Theology degree. Not sure which yet. Those are my hopes and dreams. I also want to go to Japan someday and do missions work there, wherever God may lead. But those are the plans right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, my name's Josh. I graduated from LBC about 2 years ago. 2 years ago. 2 years ago. Yeah. Sorry. For those of you who are just listening to the audio, I had to look at my wife off screen. I have a terrible memory, but she remembers all the good stuff for me. Yeah, so I graduated LBC about 2 years ago, went there for 4 years, studied youth and young adult ministries. Before that, very active in my old church, was helping with ministry, attended the youth group there. I've been a Christian since I was 14 or 15. So about a decade I've been a Christian. So right now I do part-time youth ministry work on my church's youth director at Mannheim Grace Brethren Church, and work third shift with Woody at the warehouse we're at. Hoping to eventually go back to college. I'd like to get a master's as well, probably in counseling. And what I want to do with that is take the opportunity to work with troubled youth, kids who have come from really rough circumstances, and just help them. I don't know. I guess just help them work through those issues so that they can become healthy and the best functioning people that they can be, and help them contribute to society the best that they can.
Yeah. With that being said, do you want to go ahead and share like your testimony, like how you kind of came to have that passion?
All right, sure. So, well, first things first. Once again, my name's Josh. I like long walks on the beach, and I like reading, music, and video games. So there you go. Some more character development so that this doesn't feel out of the blue.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So my story starts very much back at the beginning. Even before I was born, of
when
course.
God created the heavens and the earth.
Well, we're not going that far back. We're not getting into that theological stretch of stuff.
Yeah.
No, so of course my story starts with my parents. They basically met up one day before even my older brother was born, and they were like, "Hey, you're kind of cool, and I like doing drugs with you." So naturally, they decided to move in together. Had my older brother, eventually had me. So as a young child, of course I don't remember this because nobody has memories of being a baby. But my father shortly left after that, and my mother was left to raise 3 children at that point, basically by herself. So growing up right away, at that point, I had an absent father and a mother who tried her best, but also was a junkie and was like on everything. Pot, crack, cocaine, heroin, painkillers. Pretty sure she would drink soap if she thought it would give her a high. So I kind of grew up in that environment. I had a mom that, as I got older and felt that she could leave us more, sometimes would be gone for stretches of days, partying, getting her vices. So me and my older brother were kind of left to raise ourselves. My older sister was in and out of the house constantly, dealing with her dad. So most of my life, and that sounds pretty boring just to, generalize it like that, but most of my life, that was that. I was pretty much alone. My mom was never around. When she was around, she was busy dealing with, stuff around the house, like my older brother and his wild lifestyle that he was developing, or trying to keep an eye on my younger brother who, was born a few years later. So I was very much kind of alone in the world. I didn't have any friends at school just because, without a parent to teach you how to be a proper person, you lack half-decent social skills, and I was just kind of an angry kid in general, so nobody wanted to talk to me. So just kind of a depressed kid, hated myself, hated my family. Mom was never around anyway. So that went on as it did until I was like, oh gosh, I'm so bad at math. I had just turned 12. It was literally the day after my birthday. And, a bunch of cops show up at our house, and some lady in some, important looking suit, and she's like, hey, Child Protective Services, we're taking your kids from you.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So, so was taken into foster care. What year was that? 2008? Yeah, 2008. Moved around a lot in the foster homes because either people don't want foster kids, sadly, who are older a lot of the time. They want somebody who is younger, a little more agreeable, doesn't have, their worldview almost formed at that point. So moved around a lot, hated everybody I ended up with, hated myself, hated my mom for letting this happen. Depression got worse, started cutting myself, hating myself even more. But I also had this really weird feeling of still missing my family, because it's like, as much as they sucked, they were pretty much all I had.
Right.
Yeah. So from there, I eventually ended up in the town of Manheim, Pennsylvania. So not too far from where my mom lived anyway. Ended up with a Christian family, and they started taking me to church with them. I was pretty opposed to that at first, honestly, because I was a kid who had always loved science, and I was just kind of like, ew, Christianity and science don't mix.
They contradict each other, man.
Yeah, so I was always just kind of like, oh, I don't want to go to church. You guys are a bunch of religious freaks who, can't see past your own noses or what you read in some old book. But, eventually I stopped fighting them. I made some good friends at the church, had a lot of good conversations with those foster parents. And eventually, as I continued to get older living with them, I started really analyzing religion, trying to find what did I really believe as a person. Because, yeah, it's one thing to say, I believe in science, but, like, everybody believes in good science. Everybody believes in the right sciences. So I was really trying to formulate who am I as a person other than just this angry, depressed teenager, and what could I do to make myself better. So for me, it became an academic pursuit. I started studying the Eastern religions, Buddhism and Taoism, Confucianism, or whatever that one is, Confucius, whatever he wrote. Worked my way over to studying Islam, studied Judaism, gave Christianity a lot of thought, even Native American spiritualism, and just kind of like that almost shamanistic kind of look, the idea of there being a spirit world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the more and more I studied, I found that as much as I still love science, there's a lot of weird stuff that cannot be simply explained by science. I think there's definitely stuff that's outside of our realm that just won't make sense with a strictly scientific worldview. But I also found that, to my incredible surprise, Christianity was the religion that made the most sense scientifically, as far as what it spoke of as science in the Bible, and as far as a worldview, the idea of ethics, morality, all of that. So while I wasn't a Christian at this point, I would say at that point I probably started having more of a Christian mindset. So I guess at this point I'm what I would call a theist. Not atheist, a theist.
There's a difference, people.
Yes. So, yeah. Stuff was going okay, I guess, on the foster care front, though. My mom was kind of working to try and get us back. We went back with her for a while, and then she slipped back into doing all of her drugs again, and she lost us again. Got us back again a few months later, lost us again. And that really hurt, because it showed me as a young kid that, maybe my mom really did love me, but obviously not enough to try and get off these drugs to keep us. So eventually, my mom's parental rights were terminated, and the folks who became my legal guardians decided to take me in, which was great, because I love them, and they did a lot to help formulate my faith. But I just remember the day that decision was made in court, it really sucked, because, once again, my mom seemed like she didn't put in the effort. She didn't want to put in the effort to really keep us. So that night I was honestly just contemplating suicide, because it was like nothing made sense. I had some great friends and everything, but that's my family. And it's like, when your own mother doesn't want to fight for you, and when your father didn't even make an effort to try and be there or do anything to get you out of that situation, it's like, what are you going to do? Yeah. So I'm not going to go into, like, the details of like what I attempted to do. All you guys have to know is that I wanted to die, so I was seriously going to attempt it. But right as I was about to, I found myself suddenly stopping. Not out of cowardice, which is what I thought it was at first. I believe it was an act of God saying, hey, this isn't what I want for you, man. And, at first I was angry because I thought it was an act of cowardice. I fell on the ground and I'm weeping and I'm punching the ground. Pretty sure I broke a finger because of how angry I was doing that. And I'm just thinking to myself, why can't I even do this? Have I become that weak of a person that I can't even see this through? So I'm sitting there, I'm crying, I'm a wreck. But I start thinking to myself, I'm thinking, of these people who took me into their home and the love that they're showing me. And I'm thinking of all the people at church, my friends I had made at church. And all of the people I had met in the past couple months and years who really were trying to speak into my life. And then I started thinking more about a lot of the conversations I had with my foster father about Christianity and about the person of Christ and how he died for us because, we're sinners and we suck, and without that, we're going to go to hell. And I thought to myself, I'm like, dang, if I really killed myself, would I end up going to this hell place? And as much as I still was unsure about the overall Christian faith at that point, I was like, well, a lot of the other stuff that I've researched about Christianity has turned out to be true. So I was kind of like, so there's a good chance that could be true as well. But then I started thinking about love, Christ's love. Why would this random guy from 2,000 years ago, if he's God, why would he look into the future and think, I'm going to die for that guy and for everyone else? And that broke me down. So I cried and I started praying, and I think that was the point where I really became a Christian.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's the weirdest feeling, man. And the only way I can describe it is, as I'm crying, it's like I felt like this warmth, almost like an electric blanket, but like on the inside. I had never felt anything like that before. But yeah, since then I've been trying my best to follow the Lord, studying the Bible, just really contending for that faith. And a lot of stuff has happened since then.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of stuff that has really just pushed me more towards fighting for that faith.
Yeah.
My foster parents, the people who took me in, they ended up getting divorced. That's a long story in itself. We don't have time for that today.
Yeah, we don't have time for that today, in case you were wondering.
Yeah, we don't have time for that today. But the one thing I can say from all of that is that God has always been faithful to me. And, because of that, it's led up to this point of me wanting to do ministry, work with troubled kids, and now doing this podcast so that hopefully we can reach some others.
Yeah.
So, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And, that's the way, I like it.
Well, I hope you stick to it. I hope there's no editing or revision in the future. Otherwise, I'd be very concerned.
I mean, I might go back to make it a little cooler.
Make you sound a lot more like BA than you actually are.
Yeah. Make myself sound like a hardened war veteran who always cursed the name of God because I lost too many allies in the war or something. Make myself sound like a Knight Templar.
Oh man. Well, hey, dude, praise God. And to see where you were years ago to where you are now, and just knowing you from the time I've known you for the short period I have, it's just really amazing to see how God has worked in your life and how God has, while we are, still not completely sanctified, Jesus is continuously sanctifying us, just how far we've come from, the desolate area that we were once in. So with that being said, I do have a couple questions for you.
Shoot, man.
Yeah.
Shoot. Yeah.
Cool. So, first question I would have for you is, you said that you were a bit of a skeptic. You once believed that science and Christianity did not interact. What would you say to the skeptic who believes currently that science and Christianity contradict each other, or maybe they don't match up?
Well, the first thing I would do is there are 2 books I would have them read. The first one is a book called Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. Fantastic book.
I need to read that.
Yeah, that my foster dad had me read that, and that started really challenging my worldviews on a lot of stuff. So that's a good one, not even just for scientific skeptics, but just for skeptics of any branch, whether it's a philosophical skepticism, or just the idea of why Christianity over any religion. The other book that I remember reading, I think the name of it is called like Darwin's Black Box.
Okay.
I can't remember who wrote it. He's a biology professor.
Should I look it up real quick?
Yeah, look it up. I think
right.
the guy's from Pennsylvania too, so it's like he's a hometown hero. But
find out these from Pittsburgh or something.
Yeah, I mean, hey man, it's all home to me.
Michael Bay?
Michael Bay. What's good?
Michael Bay wrote a Christian book. What?
or is it Behe?
Behe or something? Behe. That's what it says. So we're sorry for butchering that, but yes, it's Michael Bay.
Bay.
Let's just say Michael Bay.
Yeah, but Darwin's Black Box.
The biochemical challenge to evolution.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and that was one of the things that really kept me from believing Scripture. This idea that the Book of Genesis can't obviously be real because it speaks of this idea that a lot of Christians have, basically the creation of man from God. We were always men. We were never monkeys or anything like that.
Right.
So creationism versus evolution. I just didn't see how those two things could really could go together at all. So as somebody who, one in the public school system was always taught evolution is true, and then reading the Bible, it was always like, oh, well, those two can't go together. But, the more you read, the more it's like, there's actually a lot of challenges to Darwinian evolution and the evolution theory in general coming anymore. And I've heard some people say, that probably within the next 10 to 20 years we'll see the collapse of Darwinian evolution altogether, honestly. So I would start with those 2 books, The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel and Darwin's Black Box by Michael Bay. Because we said Michael Bay, and it's like, well, if he wrote a Christian book, he would have to insert explosions in slow motion everywhere.
I mean, I'm sure that Action Bible I have, the comic book. I'm sure
that thing is awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure he could create a version of that comic book form, but just have tons of explosions, just violence, and
he'll do it as pop-up art.
Yeah,
open it and there's a mushroom cloud.
Yeah, which, by the way, plugging that book. Although one thing I will say is it does leave out a lot of the violent stuff. So it's aimed towards kids, but also.
Well, I think there is actually a more mature Action Bible.
Is there?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So I don't know. We might need to look into that. Maybe we'll do a book reading and show for the podcast, and we'll just be like, oh, look at that! Look how Phineas is just goring those 2 right there. Isn't that beautiful?
Doing a violent puppet show.
Yeah, that's exactly what we need.
Cool. Well, hey, one more question, man, and then we can move forward. Unless you want to keep. Actually, no. Side note, real quick, to what we were just talking about. Also, with those who would say that the Bible and science can't go together, they contradict each other. I would just challenge you with one thing, and I think Josh can agree with me on this. The Bible is, even though I believe that the Bible and science go hand in hand, the Bible is not a science book.
Oh, absolutely not.
The Bible is written as mostly a historical narrative. And so when you read the Bible, one thing you can't really expect to find in the Bible is an answer to every scientific dilemma that we have. I believe that the Bible addresses very important scientific dilemmas, but you can't read
Yeah, Jesus never had a sermon in the classroom.
Yeah.
There was never Jesus being all like, and today we talk about lipids and proteins and how they bond to form these things.
Yeah. If you're trying to learn how to ride a bike, the Bible's not going to tell you how to ride a bike. Like
No. I will say, yeah, absolutely, that's a good point. The Bible is not a science textbook, but when the Bible does speak of science, or if it brings up a scientific subject in the Bible, it is correct about it. I will say that. So, yeah, no, that's a good point. You're not going to find all of your scientific answers in the Bible. But I think oftentimes you will find that if you really, really study the Word of God, and then you really, really study science well, you will see there's no contradictions or dilemmas within the two.
Yes. And, maybe... so maybe you agree with me on this. You can clarify if I'm wrong here, but... to me, like when I'm reading the Bible, it kind of seems like throughout the course of the Bible, chronologically anyway, there seems to be like various degrees of revelation. Like when it can come to like scientific stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like you see, I think I watched a video on this, but like you can also like read for yourself. Like the Israelites had no like real scientific concept of the mind, like our brain. Like they believe that everything came from the heart, so therefore like imagery that came like when it dealt with thoughts like or like conviction, God would use imagery of the heart, whereas like in the New Testament when people had like a more a more firm grasp of what the mind was, and the Shema, when Jesus reiterates the Shema, he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Whereas in Deuteronomy, the mind isn't even mentioned. It's just love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the idea that the mind was not always the idea of the of like let me try and reword that because I'm still waking up, honestly. Yes, in ancient cultures, the mind was never thought to be important. The where all your thoughts, your memory, who you were as a person was all located at the heart. The mind was largely disregarded by a lot of societies. That's why the ancient Egyptians would honestly just stick a fish hook up your nose, pull it out, and toss it out.
Right.
Because they thought it was worthless.
So like that's why when God like conveyed his word to the people, he would do it in a way that they could understand.
Yeah, and like you said, there are different forms of revelation. Scientific revelation, if God can reveal himself through science in the natural world, through the idea of design, that's one of those. Look up the idea of the Fibonacci sequence and how that proves creation. That's a great idea. There's that, and of course there's divine revelation, God actually like interjecting and being all like, hey, I exist, what's up, here's my book. So yeah, there are a few different forms of revelation. So that's, I think you'll learn more about those as you go through your courses at Bible college.
Right, and guys, I just want to put it out there. I don't claim to be like scientifically knowledgeable.
And I don't have a degree, but I can read by people who do have degrees.
Yes, and I think, and I'll get into my background a little bit later on in a few minutes, but I think Josh like seems to be more interested in science than I've been, where I was like, I'm more interested in history. So like when it comes to arguing for like historical accuracy with the Bible, I think I'm better suited for that, whereas Josh would be better suited for arguing scientifically for the Bible. But I digress. That's just to show like, we have different strengths and weaknesses, so don't always expect us to, understand each other, let alone you understand everything we're trying to say, because we might be saying things that we might think is like easy for us, but may not be easy for you.
I'm also going to throw out here, we don't have all the answers.
Nope.
None of us have degrees in science or history or anything like that. So I may, or Bryan may, occasionally say something that's wrong, or, we may say something that is not super relevant to the actual topic at hand. Yeah, so, but that being said, like we don't have degrees, but we do a lot. I mean, I do a lot of reading. I do read a lot of science books or science-based books. So if you ever want to talk about it, or if you ever feel like something that we said was wrong, like I said, we'll give you some contact info at the end. We're more than willing to have a civil conversation.
A sinful conversation?
Well, did I say sinful?
It sounded like it.
Oh, civil. Yeah, we're more than willing to have a civil conversation with people. Cool. We don't think we know better than anybody else. Honestly, as much as I like science, I'm not really, like, the biggest biology guy. I just know that, if you play with liquid nitrogen and dry ice in certain ways, you can make those things blow up, so...
Yes, we are fallible human beings, but, just know that this is conversation-based, so, yeah, like I said, we're not going to get everything right. We might make some contradictions in our conversations, because this is not scripted at all, so...
No, this is really off the cuff.
Yeah. So,
yeah, did you say you had another question for me?
Yes, one more, and then, due to time, I'll get into my testimony, and we can wrap up.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is going a lot longer than I thought it would.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah, that's good. Like, I'm glad this isn't going to be like a 30-minute episode. But...
Yeah, good.
Cool. So one more question. You dealt with a lot of depression growing up, and you dealt with a lot of, like, past trauma, pain, and I, while your experience is unique to yourself, like, I think we can both agree that there are a lot of people, especially in today's day and age, that are dealing with a lot of trauma and pain from their past.
Absolutely.
People that are lacking hope, people that don't really know where to turn to, and maybe aren't necessarily maybe they're not comfortable with the idea of God, or like maybe they've never heard enough about Him. What would you say to that person, the person who is struggling with depression, who maybe is lacking of hope, who is really just trying to find comfort in the midst of their situation?
I mean, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Because as much as I wish I could go up to somebody and give them a hug and be like, hey, man, like, I know what you're feeling. It's okay. Jesus loves you. A lot of people don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
Totally. And while some people may react positively to that, a lot of people would react negatively to that too. So I think the most important thing isn't really what would you say, but rather, sympathize, empathize, be with the person. Stand side by side with them, let them know you're there for them, you support them, you've been through what they've been through. I think that's more important than any word will ever be. Words are good. You can speak all the truth you want to them about God loving them, and I think they need to hear that. But I think what's really going to make the difference in their lives is you being Christ to that person.
Yeah.
So, as important as finding some good words to say would be, definitely take time to be supportive to that person and let them know that you're there for them.
Yeah.
Because I know the one thing that always used to get me mad, and the one thing I still hear a lot of people say that enrages me to no end, is the Christian who says, oh, well, if you have depression or an anxiety disorder, it's because you don't have enough faith.
Yeah, there was never any apostles or, even characters in the Old Testament who didn't deal with, feelings of despair or hopelessness. That doesn't happen.
I mean, dude, all I know is that I read some of the Old Testament prophets, and there are times where they're like, Lord, it would have been better if you would have just let me die. And I am like, I get that. I get where you're coming from 100%. Man.
Yeah, and, just going on record here, I would like to clarify, and I'll get into this a little more in a few minutes, but I personally, even though I've been saved for 3 years and have been following Christ for 3 years, there's still moments that I deal with a lot of depression. I'm sure you can speak for that for yourself. And, that's, in an ideal world, we wouldn't, where Christ would be all that we need. And He is all that we need, but, I think to an extent, we see, the things that are going on in this world, and it just, really saddens us. And, it's it's a very real thing. I don't want to make light of what depression is or what. And that's
Oh
what the
no,
story
absolutely not. It's a big deal, and just because I'm a Christian doesn't mean that doesn't mean it's gone away. It's gotten a lot better between between the idea of me having this personal connection with my God, but also from the fact that I believe God gave us counselors and friends and people to talk to, and breakthroughs in what is good for mental health to help those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I'm with you. As a Christian, I still deal with depression, and you can ask my wife. There are days where I am just like bummed out to the max.
Yeah.
And she's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. Just feels sad.
Yeah.
It feels like somebody's squeezing my heart." Nice poetic angst there. But yeah, just because we're Christians doesn't mean that we're never going to have those issues either. Christianity doesn't mean you suddenly don't have issues.
Yeah, I think I think Josh can speak for this too. The difference now, like with depression and anxiety, is beforehand we didn't really have a hope, and now that we are Christians, even though we still deal with that, we do have a hope, and that gives us the strength to go forward. I was gonna say something else, but I don't remember what it was. Oh no, this is so embarrassing.
Dude, it happens to us all the time in real life. It's got to happen at least once on camera.
Yeah. Oh no, I know what I was gonna say. But yeah, like we, as this podcast, like we don't want to sidestep important issues. I think that's can be a pretty big problem, like among a lot of Christian communities. Is like we kind of just like write off, like very real problems that we deal with in the world today, and we don't want to do that here. We want to have vulnerable, honest conversations about things that are a little tough. And we will give our honest take on it, and you may love or hate our opinion, and that's probably going to happen. So expect that, but just know, like we do desire your feedback, and we want to know your perspective. So by all means, please email us or contact us. We want to hear what you have to say, and we want to have these conversations. We think that they're productive, and even if we don't agree, like we can. At least like have a learning experience together.
Well, it's important to have these conversations.
Yes, indeed.
The Christian church in America has been silent on a lot of these problems for far too long.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of things that I feel underprepared to talk about because the American church has failed me in preparing for that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, can I talk to somebody about Jesus and why he's so awesome? Absolutely. Can I talk to somebody about, oh gosh, there's so much I could name. Just to give a relative example, or a relevant example for stuff that's going on, can I talk about Christ and the importance that, his gospel has and the mission the church should have in race relations and racial reconciliation? No, I can't, because the American church doesn't talk about race. They're like, ooh, that's a touchy subject. The American church has failed us when it comes to preparing for talks about these big issues, or at least I'll say the American church in general. Not all churches. If your church talks about a lot of those touchy subjects and isn't afraid of them, that's awesome.
The mainstream church.
Yeah, but in general, the American church has failed. For example, I can talk to somebody about Jesus all day and about how awesome he is and about why the Bible is a really cool book. But, overall, when somebody wants to ask me about a touchy subject like race relations and how Jesus relates to race and racial relations and what the church should be doing to reconcile race relations, I can't help you there. I mean, I'm trying to learn about it. I'm really trying to take time to study it. But the American church looks at that and says, ooh, that's a really touchy subject. We're not going to go near that. And then on Sunday, they're like, but hey, so there's this guy named Paul, and let me tell you guys what, he used to say a lot of really funny stuff.
But hey, if you tithe more, all your problems will go away,
Yeah, reach deep into your pockets. The chicken bucket's coming around again. Yeah, so... No, I think it's really important that the church in America should start discussing those issues. And I think that's one thing that we want to do. We want to start discussing those issues because Christians need to know about these things, and Christians need to know how to relate to people on these things.
Right, and I think in the postmodern world that we live in, you see a lot of like younger Christians starting to think a little more for themselves. At least I'm hoping so.
Yeah.
But I am confident that in the future, like we will have this generation of Christians that will, really want to like just logically tear apart everything and to construct things that make sense. And I'm hopeful for that, and we want to be a part of that. So in this podcast, we we want to clarify that we're not afraid to have these conversations. We welcome these conversations, but you need to know that we are, again, fallible human beings. We make mistakes, but we are going to have opinions that you may love or you may hate, and that's okay. If you disagree or if you have questions, please email us, get in contact with us, and we would love to have these conversations. And maybe you'll change our minds, maybe we'll change yours, but that's the important thing is we want to be able to talk about this stuff. We want to be able to have a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, man, we need to have these conversations. These are issues that we can't just turn blind eyes to anymore.
Yes, indeed.
But I think that's enough about that rabbit trail. Woody, I think you should have a testimony as well for us, considering that, like,
Yes, sir. Also, I would like to clarify, guys, because I think this is we've been saying this like all podcasts, and you guys have no idea what we're talking about. When he calls me Woody, that's my nickname at work. So that's where that comes from.
Oh, yeah. In any of the posts any of you guys may have seen before this, I tried to be professional and be all like, Bryan, but like,
My last name's Wood. That's why.
But, so, to me, he's Woody, and he probably always will be.
Yeah, so you guys can just refer to me that as well. I don't care. Whatever. Yeah, it's cool. But yeah, man.
Story time, Woody.
Shoot.
Take us back.
This is going to be a long one too. I'll try to be brief and to the point.
Well, like one of my professors always told me, when it comes to sharing your testimony or at teaching anything important, and take time because we got time.
Okay.
But he always said, look at it like an apple tree. You're not going to go for the lame apples. You're going to go for the super awesome, like deliciously ripe apples.
Yes.
You're going for the big apples off the tree.
I like that.
But hey, man, pick as many apples as you want.
Yeah, we'll get rid of the bad apples later. But so just a little bit about myself. Like I said before, I'm Bryan. I go to LBC. I'm pastoral men degree. A little bit about myself. I'm a geek all around. Love video games. Yeah, love video games. Love movies. Love comic books. Love music. I also love disc golf. By the way, I'm terrible at disc golf, but I do like playing it.
Thought you were going to say disco at first. I'm like, no, Woody. Disco died for a reason.
Stop it. No, love disc golf. Horrible at it, but I'm working on it. Really getting into it. It's like a newer hobby, but yeah, I love it a lot. Love the outdoors. Love nature. Love going on hikes. Hikes don't really love me because I get gross and sweaty and get a bunch of bug bites all the time, so that's not fun. But yeah,
I think that's part of being in the outdoors in general, but hey, whatever.
Yeah, true. But yeah, love the Word of God. I'm really into apologetics. Like I love very very left side brain oriented. I love to tear things apart logically, so expect that. But yeah. So yeah, I was raised in a church my entire life. Josh and I have very different stories, but very, I think, very specific stories to different people. So I think this will be great that you can hear, two testimonies of how God has worked in the lives of us. But yeah, I grew up in a Christian home my entire life. My parents went to this church when I was an infant, and that's where I stayed for about 19 years. So, I went to a Christian school, and, I knew a lot about God and the Bible, but I didn't understand what it meant to me and, like, what it meant for me. So when I thought I was a Christian, I was more just practicing and believing the things I was taught because, like, that's what my family did. That's what I was around. So, like, okay, yeah, this is normal. This is what I need to adhere to. This is what I need to submit to. While at the same time just not taking in the fullness of who God was. So yeah, I when I was in like 6th grade, started going to youth group. Loved it. So cool. Had a lot of fun. Made a lot of new friends at the time, and really that's when I really like started to get into like the church thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, again, I was just like I didn't really understand it. And like in 9th grade, I remember I think it was it was 9th grade. I was at church, and I was a part of this like new small group or whatever, like groups within our youth group, because we had a really big church, and we went on like a group trip, which we would do every so often, like just like kind of hang out as a group, and my leaders were actually the parents of this girl my age, and they were talking about her, and they were like, oh, like you're into movies and like video games and stuff. Oh, our daughter is too. It's like, cool, yeah. And then
so wait, you hold up. Did you really have youth leaders trying to set you up with their daughter, or is that what I'm getting here?
I don't know if they were trying, but if they weren't trying, they were going to be really disappointed later on. So yeah, about a week later, this girl came up to me, and she was like, at the time I just remember like she was just like so beautiful, and she said, "Hey, like, are you Bryan?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Oh, well, hey, I'm your leader's daughter. I just want to introduce myself." And like it was a really awkward interaction. Like I didn't really know what to say. She was extroverted, I wasn't.
Seems to be a common thread in your life.
Shut up. Yes, that's true. But so yeah, we started messaging on Facebook, and lo and behold, 2 weeks later, we started dating. And I just remember like at that point in my life, I was just like I felt like a lot of happiness. I think depression was like kind of starting to make its way into my life a little bit, but like I just remember finding satisfaction in this person. And I had in my mind like after high school, like I was going to ask her to marry me. We dated for about 2 years, but as our relationship continued, and we weren't our relationship wasn't centered around Christ, like our relationship started to become a train wreck. And we started there were lines that the church we went to set up at the time, like I now realize are lines that Christ put in place for to protect us, and for for our own benefit, and also because it's his command. But
right.
like we started crossing those boundaries. Like kissing went from like a lot of inappropriate physical touch to like I remember when I was 16, I even though I said I never would, like I eventually lost my virginity to this girl. And it was like I just remember at that point, like I just kind of stopped caring a lot about Christ and the church, and really just started like live a life of worldliness. So yeah, after that, that's kind of when everything started falling apart. There was a lot of like unfaithfulness in that relationship, and like just a lot of hurt, a lot of pain. Then fast forward a little bit, about like near the end of our relationship, we decided to take a break. I had some very negative influences around me at the time with school, and I just I remember like just dabbling with marijuana a little bit here and there, not telling her, of course. But then my friend tried to cheer me up, and by the way, this is not how you cheer your friend up if this kind of thing ever happens to you. So he gave me a free tab of LSD, right? And I just remember like the day before we officially ended it, I took LSD. I was like, whoa, I'm woke now, bro.
I can taste colors and I can see sounds.
But yeah, I took that LSD, and like probably like halfway through my trip, I had an emotional breakdown, and I just realized like I did not want to lose her, and I didn't know what to do like if I didn't have her. So I texted her and admitted to her that I was on LSD, and she basically took that as an opportunity to officially end things. And I just remember after that, I was an absolute wreck. Emotionally, I was just absolutely devastated, and I didn't have any other like solid ground to pick myself back up on. Like I just felt like I was drowning, and I tried to go to people at my church for support, and it didn't really seem like anybody cared. Nobody, I say this now like just to convey what I was feeling then. I don't blame anybody there at the time. I understand that we were all children, basically. So I'm not pushing the blame towards anyone else. Like, I'm just trying to convey what was happening at the time. But yeah, I got really angry at my church and, at her and at God, because I felt like at the time, like, I didn't deserve this, and I couldn't handle like this emotion that was never, like, that I've never even heard of before. Like, this just intense, like, grief, which in retrospect sounds a little silly now, but yeah, I just remember at that point I was like, I don't want anything to do with church. I don't want anything to do with God anymore. I don't like, these people are whack jobs.
Yeah.
So I started just going throughout high school. I was dealing with a lot of bad depression, but like, I just, I was hanging around friends that were like really, really bad influences on me, but I didn't really want anything to do with church. Remember when I was 18, I just recently graduated high school, and I came back from senior week, brought a little bit of weed back, and I wasn't like big into marijuana at the time. It was just like a thing I did occasionally. But I remember there's this guy I hung out with like once, but didn't really hang out with too much before, and I asked him if he wanted to hang out with me and my other friend, like smoke a little weed and then like go see a movie. And little did I know that this other guy was like really into smoking weed. Like, he probably like got...
So you really made his day.
Yeah. Well, he had his own. He's like, "Oh, you want to smoke some mine?" Yeah, sure, whatever. But like, after that, I started to form like a pretty like deep friendship with this guy. And little did I know that would be kind of my downfall, but ultimately what would bring me to Christ. So what happened after that is, him and I started to form a relationship. We would hang out all the time, like smoke weed together. And I eventually got to the point where I was smoking a quarter of an ounce a week, which, by the way, that's $75 a week. I was working a part-time job at a grocery store. I could not afford that. But what I once told myself was, okay, I'm never going to do drugs. I started smoking weed. I was like, all right, I'm never going to do anything worse than weed. I would never do that. Well, that turned to just experimenting with all kinds of drugs, like on the weekends. Pills, we did Xanax pretty frequently, Adderall, then that turned to, doing LSD pretty regularly, to, eventually, like, I did coke a couple times, and among other things, and I just, like a year before that, I don't think I could have ever imagined myself reaching that point. But I did, and on the outside, I was in denial and tried to, convey that, okay, like, I'm happy, like, this is cool, I'm just like, this is what young people do, like, I can do drugs, it's cool, like, I'm just woke, everybody else is just stupid.
Woke.
But yeah, like, but on the inside, I was dying inside, and I was unhappy, and honestly, like, I wanted to kill myself several times. And what eventually happened was, fast forwarding a little too much. Eventually I was at my friend's house, and he had these new pills. I was like, "What's that?" He's like, "Well, this is Oxycontin." I was like, "Oh, you mean like?" He's like, "Yeah, this is like the strongest painkiller you can get. Like, this is basically heroin in pure form." And so I remember just like taking half of that with him, because he was like, "Yeah, if you take the whole thing, like, you're gonna be like messed up, dude. So like, take half." And I just remember that night, it was just like a really uncomfortable experience. Like, I felt like itchy, and like, I remember going to bed that night and just like wondering if I was gonna wake up, because my breathing got really shallow. But like, at the same time, I didn't care, and I was like, okay, well, whatever. Well, lo and behold, I survived. I woke up.
Obviously.
Yeah, I'm still here. So, but yeah, then a few weeks later, I was really big into rap at the time, like trap,
like thug life,
yeah,
like hardcore rap,
filthy rap, and like a really big thing that was in the rap scene. And I'm not sure if it still is or not, but like is lean, which what lean is that's. I'm educating you guys on drugs today, by the way, so you're welcome.
Great.
Well, basically, what lean is, it's cough syrup that's actually illegal now, but basically it has codeine in it, and if you drink too much of it, it actually gives you like a codeine high, like some kind of similar to heroin.
So super random sidetrack.
Sure.
I remember working in the pharmacy a few years ago when that became a big issue, and my wife will tell you about this. But we had one boss who heard somewhere, and I don't know how true this is, that if you take Burt's Bees and you rub that on your eyelids and then drink that stuff, like, I guess it intensifies the effects. So I just remember him freaking out and literally, like, taking every single Burt's Bees product or anything like it out of the pharmacy.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
He was like, no, we can't have this. Kids are going to get super high. And I'm like, we could just stop selling the cough syrup. And he's like, well, they'll get that somewhere else. I'm like, they can get Burt's Bees somewhere else.
Oh man, yeah, you kids and your drugs today, you're weird.
I was going to say back in my day, and I'm like, well, I never did any, so whatever.
Back in my day, we were just taking a bunch of Robitussin
Yeah.
and getting really unpleasant highs.
Anyway, we're not trying to make light of drug use. It's a terrible thing.
Yeah,
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
I can tell you firsthand, it's not worth it. But so anyway, yeah, I just remember, that night I took it. I was just like, I got so much anxiety, and I didn't realize it at the time, like what anxiety was. But like I was just like so paranoid, and like I remember having a similar effect to when I took, Percocet. And like I felt like my breathing was shallow. I didn't know if I was gonna wake up. And I remember that night, like I actually prayed to God. I wasn't sure if I believed in, and asked him like, please don't let me die from this. And I didn't. But the drug use like continued. And I will say, like, I was never really addicted to one specific drug, but what I was addicted to was being high. Like I couldn't go like a day without being high, to some degree. And that would include alcohol too. But yeah, so eventually, when I was like smoking a 1/4 ounce of weed a week, I got really careless around people. Like I would just like whatever. But one day I was like, all right, Mom, I'm leaving. Bye. Like I'm going to school. I was enrolled at like a community college at the time. And I remember just like sitting in my car, and I was like getting my bowl ready. My mom came out, and she was like, I had a grinder, like a weed grinder in my hand, and she said, "What's that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's used for like tobacco." She's like, "No, it's not. What is that?" And like I just knew, like I couldn't afford. I was like, it's weed. Like it grinds weed. She's like, "You're smoking weed?" It's like, "Yeah." She's like, "Throw it out now." It's like, shoot. So
$75 down the drain.
Oh man, yeah, that was a huge hole in my pocket right there. But yeah, so I threw it out, and like I just remember like just being so scared. I was like, oh my gosh. I called my mom later. She said she's like, I'll let it slide this time. She's like, but if you ever bring that in my house again, you're out. You're done. I was like, okay, fair enough. So I stopped smoking weed for a while. I actually stopped doing like a lot of drugs for a while, and I was clean for a few months, but I was still like super depressed. And eventually, like I started like getting back into smoking weed a little bit, like 3 months later, but like really low key. But what I forgot is that when you stop smoking weed for a while, your tolerance goes way down.
So you overdid it the first time.
I overdid it. Well, actually, no. Backtrack a week before that, I was still like getting alcohol, like from my friend, and I remember like just like the night before, I just drank a ridiculous amount of vodka, and I woke up the next day like hungover, but also like I had this like weird feeling in my stomach, like kind of like a pulsating feeling, and also like I kind of felt like breathing was a little harder, but I didn't think anything of it. Fast forward a few hours later, I'm playing a game with my brother and my cousin, and it just felt like I couldn't breathe anymore. Like breathing was getting super hard, and like I started freaking out. I told them like I had to go, and like I just ran out to the kitchen and told my dad I couldn't breathe. Like I felt like I was dying, and eventually I calmed down. But basically what I learned I had that day was an anxiety attack, which I had never had before. And fast forward a week later, I remember the day perfectly in my head because it was just freaking terrible. But it was a Tuesday night. I just got off work and I had some weed that I bought that I was keeping at my friend's house. And back in the day when my tolerance was like up to here, what I would do is like I had a bong. This is really bad that I'm like describing in such vivid detail, but I want to stress the importance of this. I had a bong that I would fill like all the way up and just like try to like get it all like one hit.
Mm-hmm.
But my tolerance being way down, that would like get me ridiculously high. So I did that, and like I just like 5 minutes later, I just got extremely paranoid and like super hot, and again like I couldn't like breathe at all. Really, like it felt like I couldn't anyway. So I went to the bathroom, like splashed cold water in my face. I tried to like just try to calm myself down. I was like, all right, you're fine. Like you're just freaking out. Like you just smoked too much. Went and sat back down. Like my heart was just beating out of my chest. It felt like I couldn't breathe whatsoever. And I looked over at my friend. I was like, hey, like please call the ambulance. Like I think I'm dying. And I go upstairs to his parents. They got concerned because like my face was like pale white. They took my blood pressure. It was skyrocketing. So they called the ambulance. Got in the ambulance. On my way to the ambulance, they had me hooked up to like a heart rate thing. I don't know what that's called, but like they basically had me hook up to a heart monitor. And I remember in the ambulance, my heart rate got up to 200 at one point.
Oof.
Yeah. So I was like really freaking out. But I got to the hospital. I started to calm down a little bit, and the doctor told me, he's like, hey, like did you just like were you just smoking weed? Like it wasn't K2 or anything. I was like, no, it wasn't K2. I had it before. He's like, all right. He's like, so what happened? I was like, you just had a really bad anxiety attack. Like you're good. We're just gonna keep you here until your heart rate gets down a little bit. All right. I was like, please don't tell my mom. She's like, we're not gonna tell your mom. It's cool. But my mom came, picked me up, and calmed down eventually. But like the rest of the week, like every day, I would just have I would have another anxiety attack. Like even without like smoking or anything. Like I decided then I was like, all right, I need to be done with this. And I wasn't sure why. Like it just kept happening, and like I would think about it when I wasn't having it, and then get freaked out, and then have another one. Like, and I remember that Sunday, my parents made me go to church with them. I couldn't even tell you what the sermon was about. I don't really remember. I was just thinking about these anxiety attacks the entire time, and I just remember like that day something just really broke in me. And I had a realization like I can't do any of this anymore. Like I am so broken and I am just completely empty inside. And so I asked my mom, I said, can you please get the pastor to pray with me? And so he came up and prayed with me, and I don't remember what the prayer consisted of. But I remember him praying with me, and I just felt something inside of me just completely break, and then all of a sudden this warmth just came over me, and the realization of who God was and the goodness of who he was just came over me, and I realized like at that point like that Jesus truly did love me. A messed up like broken wretch of a man like loved me.
Preach, man. Preach.
And I couldn't fathom it. I couldn't. So I went home that day and I just thought for a really, really long time. And I actually went back to my friend's house that night, smoked more weed like an idiot, and went home, had another anxiety attack like while I was but I was able to control it a little better this time. I was just in the shower and I realized that I just thought to myself, I was like, I need to just surrender my life to Christ. So I went out to my parents and I told them, Mom and Dad, I want to become a Christian. And I want to give my life to Christ. Like, can you please pray with me? And they said, yeah. We prayed. And I would like to say things got immediately better after that, but they didn't. I had an anxiety attack almost every day for 6 months after that. And if I'm being honest, it was hell. And I still had moments where I wanted to commit suicide because it was just unbearable. And I was just living in constant fear. But during that time too, like I realized like just how much I needed Christ to rely on. Like I had no hope elsewhere but him. And that was what kind of drew me towards him. Praise be to God, 6 months later, anxiety attacks just stopped. I'm not sure what the event was that made them stop, but they just stopped. And it's just such great relief. So yeah, I got involved in youth ministry after that at my church. And I started, unfortunately, I made a couple of stupid decisions after that and wasn't able to do youth ministry for a while, but they gracefully let me back in. And I was saved at the time, but also at the same time I was living in sin and denying it. I was still like having like really like living in lust and like completely denying that it was a problem.
Yeah.
I still like drank a lot, denied it was a problem too, and I didn't really take my relationship with Christ as seriously as I ought have. And I remember, like, yeah, and I'll get to this a little bit later, but the church I was going to at the time, like, really wasn't very biblically based. It was very emotionally based. And so I was just, like, listening to the pastor's sermons and just, like, accepting it because, like, I wasn't biblically discerning at that point.
Right.
So fast forward a little later, I get into another relationship. I'm like starting to read the Bible a little bit more for myself this time, like starting to get devotions more consistently, but like still not quite discerning yet. And I get into a relationship with this girl who I became infatuated with. I thought I was in love with her, but I was just infatuated with her. And I got really attached way too fast. And basically what ended up happening was like I thought she felt the same thing, but ultimately like she decided like a month after we started dating like that like I don't want to, I think I was just confused, and so I got naturally was very upset about it. And I remember at the time I had a coworker who started to say things to me that really challenged my beliefs as far as like theology goes. And I kind of just wrote him off. I was like, whatever, like, you have your beliefs, I have my beliefs. Doesn't matter. But, when this girl broke up with me, like, eventually, like, after trying to reconcile it, he was there for me the entire time and, like, tried to be by my side, which is saying a lot because, like, nobody else really was.
Yeah.
But, I tried to make things right. Eventually, I gave her an ultimatum. I said, hey, like, we need to, like, you need to decide what you want to do now, or like just because like I don't want to be waiting. Eventually she blocked me, and I was just like emotionally a wreck. Like I was relying on God a lot more at this point, but like it still like really hurt.
Yeah.
And I just remember like I was trying to keep it together. Like, and that night at work, on our first break, I just went and like sat in a bin and just broke down. I started bawling, and I remember he came up to me, put his arm around me, and just prayed that God would comfort me, that God would lead me in the right direction. And I just, at that point, like I felt like even though I really disagree with this guy theologically, like he really cared about me. And so, from that point forward, I started to kind of listen to him a little bit more, like be more not accepting of his views, but like I would give it more thought. And then one day out of nowhere, he just sent me this podcast, and he's like, hey, like you should listen to this. Like I didn't listen to the whole thing yet, but basically what it was a episode from this podcast called Cultish, which they tackle obviously like cults from a Christian perspective. And what the episode was on was this girl named Lindsay Davis, who went to Bethel's Supernatural School of Ministry. Now, if you guys don't know, Bethel is a very big church. They do a lot of the worship songs you heard probably come from them. They're probably like number 3 next to Hillsong and Elevation.
But they do have excellent music.
Yeah, that's the dangerous part. But yeah, so I was listening to this girl, and they were like, these guys came off like really harsh at first, and I was just like, like whatever, like these guys are just like super judgmental. What the heck? And I just hearing this girl talk, like the stuff she experienced was the stuff that like was going on in my church. and I just felt like super strong conviction from the Holy Spirit, and I tried to like I was like no whatever, like this just coincidence, like I'm sure I'm just overthinking it. And then like the more and more she talked, like the more and more like the stuff that I started thinking about was going on in my church that was not biblical. Like in my mind I was like, yeah, this isn't lining up, this isn't lining up with the Word of God. And I just remember like that day, like I had a huge change in thought of the way I believed, and I realized through that podcast. And even though like I believe I was saved at that point, like I didn't realize up until that day like just what Jesus's death on the cross meant. Up until that point, like I think I kind of thought in my head like I was wrestling between like, oh, like I can do whatever I want and God will forgive me, and like, okay, if I do this, like God will punish me. But then like I realized on that day that I don't have to worry about God punishing me because Jesus took that punishment on the cross 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I was wrestling with that for a while. I tried to ignore it at my church for like 6 months. But it became more and more apparent, like just how much they were distorting the Bible and the gospel. They were preaching like a word of faith / prosperity gospel light, I would say. Like
Nice.
But yeah, then I remember one night at church, at a youth retreat actually that I was on. We had a guest speaker. He was preaching, and then all of a sudden he asked all the youth leaders to come forward. So I come forward, and and by the way, at this time I was enrolled at Southeastern University through my church because they were partnered with my church to do pastoral leadership there, which it wasn't pastoral ministry, it was pastoral leadership. No, it was ministerial leadership. Sorry.
It was something that you were going to use in the church,
which I wasn't really satisfied with because I wanted to do pastoral work anyway.
Right.
But so, yeah, I remember like on that retreat, like I realized that they kind of like miscommunicated with me about finances, and I wasn't able to do it. And so I was just like really let down from that. I was like, God, I thought this is what you called me to do. Like, am I not called to do this? Am I called to do something else? And I just had a lot of confusion that day. But like ultimately I was like, all right, God, it's in your control, whatever you want. Well, I'm really glad that God did do that, because that night at the youth retreat, and by the way, when it comes to continuationism versus cessationism, I don't have I personally am like more of a cessationist, but like if you believe in continuationism, that's fine. I know people have good reasons for it and completely understand it. That's a secondary issue. But
do you want to explain those just in case there's people out there who don't know what you mean?
So in during the time of the apostles, when the church was first being started, there were spiritual gifts that were given among the apostles and members of the church, and these things included prophecy, speaking in tongues, which if you don't know what that is,
we could do a whole episode on that.
So speaking in tongues, translation of tongues, what have you. There are people so continuationists believe that those gifts to an extent. I don't think most continuationists believe that they're the exact same as they were in the apostolic age, but that they are still around today to some degree.
Yeah.
Cessationists believe that those gifts were used for that time,
and that they are no longer there unless for some reason God wants to kind of like slingshot them to a person for like 30 seconds.
Yeah, and I'm personally an open-minded cessationist. I believe I have heard very convincing stories of like prophecy. I think prophecy is interesting because I think a lot of people like use very vague prophecy to mislead people, but I have heard like stories of like very specific prophecy that was said to a person that actually did end up coming true. But we'll talk about that another time. But,
whole nother episode.
Yes,
man.
Sorry, I digress. But basically what happened that night was all like the guest speaker at the time invited all the youth leaders to come forward like to an altar call. And basically what he said was, okay, like I'm going to teach everyone here how to speak in tongues. And he just like started, speaking in tongues, which
it was really Italian.
But then he said, all right, all the youth leaders, I want you to start speaking in tongues over the students, and I want you to pray that God would give them the gift of tongues. And like I just remember like sitting there, I didn't know what to do. I was like, I can't speak in tongues. Like I don't know what this is. so I just started praying over students, like, randomly, like, just, I was like, God, like, please, do your will in their life, whatever, because, like, I didn't know what to do. And then he basically said, like, and then you heard, like, all these people around me, I heard all these people around me, like, start speaking in tongues, and, the pastor speaking in tongues, too, and, how, like, if you're in a worship service, like a really good worship service where, you can sometimes feel like the presence of the Holy Spirit. And like I hate to get into like feelings based theology, but like I do believe that happens. I believe that like
you get swept up in the emotion of the thing.
Sure, yeah. Which that can be another topic too. But
we've got lots of topics.
I definitely felt a presence in that room, but I can guarantee you it was not the Holy Spirit. It felt demonic. And I actually felt conviction from the Holy Spirit that was just saying, run, like, get away from this area. So I went to the bathroom and just was, like, shook for, like, a good 3 minutes. And then I called my dad, asked him to pick me up. He said he wasn't willing. So I hitched a ride with a youth leader that was leaving that night, and I made up some excuse as to why I had to leave. And, that week I was already, like, doing a young adults thing at another church, which is where I go to church now. But I had a talk with that pastor and told him the situation, and he sympathized with me, and he prayed for me, and he said, like, I don't know what, like, you're going to end up doing, but, like, hey, if you want to, like, you always have a home here if you ever want to come here. So I gave it a lot of thought that week. And, I was due to take over the prayer team at the campus I attended, and I had a lot of, like, new opportunities for youth ministry, and, I just was like, I can either, like, continue going to a church I feel very convicted to leave, and, like, keep these things, or I can give this up and go to a biblically based church that is actually going to feed me. So I went up to our youth pastor that night, and I told him, I was like, hey, I'm leaving. Didn't go over too well, if I'm being honest. I contacted the prayer team leader. He understood. He completely supported me. Then I got in contact with our campus pastor, and that was just an absolute train wreck. A lot of very harsh words were exchanged then, and leaving was very messy. But yeah, I ended up leaving. Felt conviction later on after discussing with many people about Lancaster Bible College and how great they said it was. I said, God, I don't know, like, how you're gonna make this work. I work full time, but I'm gonna just trust you. So I applied, and I said, God, if this is your will, if this is where you want me to go, like, then I trust in you. And so by God's grace, I was accepted, and I did an entire semester there so far. I absolutely loved it, and I'm still being continuously sanctified through Jesus Christ this day. I'm an imperfect sinner, but I believe that Jesus has worked in my life and has helped me to overcome areas of sin. And I believe he is making me not only a better person, but he's using it to honor and glorify his name and to show his power and his glory. And I'm so very grateful for where I am today and the friends that I have, the community I have, and how God is working in my life.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Man, was that the short version?
I'm sorry, yeah.
My goodness.
That was long. I'm sorry.
No, it's good, though. It's good, There's a lot there that's going to minister to somebody that hears that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I like that, Your story is very similar to my own mother's story. Mm-hmm. Except, it came down to, am I going to keep doing drugs, or am I not going to keep doing drugs? And yeah. Obviously my mother took the first path. She so it's just a good. I mean, first off, God's grace is fantastic. He's there for everyone.
Absolutely.
But it's also a wonderful warning to, like, hey, you can give up your beliefs and stuff and, like, end up doing stuff you say you'll never do really quickly once you compromise that first time.
Yeah. Never say, guys, that you'll never end up doing something, because we don't know what we're capable of as human beings.
Yeah. No, dude. I mean, thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
I'm
sorry that took like 3 hours, but
dude, I got nothing going on today. Yeah. No,
But yeah.
no, that's awesome.
Yeah, and guys, if God can work in the lives of Josh and I, two very broken people, and be sanctified and restored through Him and being continuously restored, He can do the same for you. And we just want to open that invitation to you guys. If you are wondering, why we believe the way we believe and why we believe that Jesus is, and let's affirm this, Jesus is the only way to God. Jesus is the only way to salvation. And the reason we believe what we believe is because God has revealed to us, just how, depraved in our sin that we were, and just
absolutely.
how far gone we were. And, we, everyone I think wants to believe that they're good people. And I believe that people are capable of doing good.
Oh, absolutely.
But I believe that in God's standard, we are not good. The Bible says if we break one part of His law, we're guilty of breaking it all. And that, we cannot in our sinful state stand before a righteous and holy God and not not have God's justice and wrath poured upon us. But, while God is completely just, He's also completely full of love, and He is the characteristic of love. And God, seeing us in our sinful state, had compassion and mercy on us to send Jesus Christ, His only Son, who never knew any sin. He was, he came down to earth, was born to a virgin, conceived by the Holy Spirit, and He lived a perfect, sinless life, completely self-sacrificial to others, and being perfect, being completely obedient to God's law, He bore the full wrath of God on the cross. He suffered a painful, humiliating, and hopeless death so that you and I could be restored if we would just believe in Him. And, there's nothing we can do to work our way to God. We are incapable of doing it. We absolutely can't. To be in the presence of a holy God, from the day we are born to the day we die, we have to live a completely morally uncompromised life.
Yeah.
But if we put our faith in Jesus Christ, if we confess out of our mouth and believe in our hearts that Jesus is Lord and that God raised Him from the dead, the Bible promises that we will be saved.
Yeah, that's what's important. It's not just saying a prayer.
It's believing.
Yeah. And then doing something with that belief.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who say that Jesus is Lord but don't believe it.
Yeah. And, Jesus even said that. He's like, hey, there's going to be lots of you people that, come up to me and be all like, hey, didn't we say you were God and do all of these wonderful things in your name? And Jesus said, and I'm going to have to say to them, I never knew you.
Yeah. So, yeah, guys, hell is a very real place. And, we share this with you because we don't desire for anybody to go to hell. We don't believe we're any better than anybody else. We believe that we're sinners saved by grace. And we want to hopefully extend that grace to you. Hell is very real. It's going to be, anything that painful that we endure on this life will not even be a fraction of what is endured in hell, and that's for all of eternity.
Yeah.
But the grace of God is a free gift, and He offers this freely to us if we believe and confess that He is Lord. And we hope that you will make that same decision. And if you don't understand, if you have questions about it, maybe you're skeptical, maybe you just want to know more, please feel free to email us. You can email us at Undeservingpodcast, it's one word, at gmail.com.
We're on YouTube.
We are on YouTube, I think.
So I'm going to throw out the rules for YouTube right now. Comment section. I know those get out of control. But please, 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 if any of you decide to watch a video and comment in the comment section, keep it civil, keep it nice. Feel free to disagree with us. That's fine, but please don't say anything in your comments that's going to get YouTube on my case with my one video that's going to be on there.
Yeah, we're willing to have conversation. We are not willing to debate. I think there's a huge difference.
Okay, I think I see where you're coming from with that.
Yeah.
Basically, I think what Woody means is this. Everything he just said is what we believe. We believe in the Bible. We believe in it as the inerrant Word of God, and that's what we stand on. So even if you think we're wrong, even if you want to argue it, that's fine. But we're not moving off that spot.
Yeah.
So I'm just throwing that out there. If you feel like you can deal with us talking about just about any subject, with that being our foundation, because we're not just going to talk theology. I mean, eventually we're going to talk. We're going to be talking video games, movies. As a big music guy myself, I'm probably going to be all like, hey guys, this is Josh's what to listen to this week.
Yeah. And, what I meant by that is we ask that you come in, if you want to have a conversation, we ask that you just come in with respect, and we will try to do the same.
Yeah,
Respect has to go both ways. And
yeah.
we can disagree and respect each other. I think that's a big misconception in our society today.
Yes, but if you, I think it was was it Morgan Freeman? Yeah, I think it was Morgan Freeman who even said one of the biggest lies in our society right now is if you disagree with someone, that means you hate them.
Mm-hmm.
And he said you gotta get rid of that. And, Morgan Freeman played God in a movie, so I think that gives him a little bit of wisdom.
All right, just like borderline sacrilegious here, but but yeah, to wrap that all up, guys, we want to reiterate again like where you can find us. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We also have our own website that is currently a blog right now. But so if you want to find us on Facebook, I think it's just
I think it's under Undeserving or Undeserving.
Yeah, if you type in Undeserving on Facebook, you'll find us. I think our official tagline on Facebook is Undeserving Podcast. We'll put that info in the link.
You'll find it.
Yeah.
You'll find it if you really want to find us. You'll find us.
Yeah, our Instagram is at Undeserving Podcast. That's one word.
Send us all of your Instagrams.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Just give me 1 second. So our website is undeservingpodcast.wordpress.com. And our YouTube is Undeserving Podcast.
Yes.
So yeah, we thank you guys for tuning in. Did I mention the email? I did say the email, right? Undeservingpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, and those are all open platforms, so like I said, please send us questions. If you have comments, concerns about anything we had, we're willing to hear you out for sure. Even if there are Christians listening to this podcast out there and they're like, wow, like, I think I just want these guys to pray for me, or I feel like I'd like to have somebody anonymously praying for me. Send us your prayer request if you feel comfortable with that. I can assure you if you do that, everything will stay confidential. It'll stay between Woody and myself. And maybe my wife, who's off screen right now, doing all of our techie stuff. But
shout out to Josh's wife.
Shout out to Jules. I think that's all of our contact points.
Yeah, and if you want to email us topic ideas, or if you want to email us like questions for us to address on the podcast, please clarify. But we're more than willing to take a look at those.
Yeah.
With all that being said, guys, we thank you so much for watching or listening. We really appreciate your support, and if you could share this with your friends by any means, share our Facebook, Instagram, website, YouTube, anything, that would help us out tremendously, and we'd greatly appreciate it. If this has been a blessing to you in any way, we invite you to share this specific episode with somebody who you think could benefit from it. With all that being said, may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be upon you, and have a wonderful, awesome day. Thank you.